Hi friends, here is our power standard for this week, 3.8b, and it says that we need to be able to explain the relationship among the major and minor characters in a story. Now, there are a lot of important vocabulary words in this standard that I want to break down before we start listening to our story for today. We know what characters are, right? They're the people in the story that things happen to, right? It's who we read about. But these words major characters and minor characters may be unfamiliar to us. The major character, think about that word major. What does it make you think of? Right? Like big, main, major, right? If it's a big deal, it's a major deal. So the major characters are like the main characters. Okay, so remember how we talked about synonyms? Two different words that have the same meaning. Major characters and main characters are the same thing. Major and main are just synonyms. And minor characters, if major is like the main character, who are those minor characters? Right? If you're thinking like the supporting characters or just the other extra people in the story, you're right. But they work together to move the plot forward. So let's think back to our example of Ish. Ramon is our major character, right? The main character. But his brother Leon, who's really only on just this page in the whole story. But without Leon, there would be no problem, right? By the minor character of Leon laughing at the major character of Ramon, it drove the story forward. So that's what I want us to think about in our read aloud today. Okay? How do the interactions of minor characters with the major characters contribute to the development of the plot? How do the relationships of the minor and major characters help move the plot forward, right? We've talked a lot about plot over the past couple of weeks, so now I know that we are super familiar with the story arc or the plot map. So today, while we're reading the story, I want you to be thinking about where each event in our story falls on the plot map and how do the character relationships help the story move forward. Make sense? All right. I'm going to leave this up here for us to think about, as well as our power standard, and we'll pull it down as we need to. But let's get started with reading the big one. Why do I love fishing so much? Most people think it's boring. You don't really do much. You just wait. Now, that's only a couple sentences into the story, but I can already see that the main character in this story loves fishing. Okay? And I can tell that this story is told in the first person, which means that the narrator of the story is also the main character. You don't really do much. You just wait. You stare at the sky, at the water, and wait. Almost always, you don't catch anything. But then, every once in a while, you catch something. And maybe once in your life, if you're lucky, you catch the big one. Now, remember how I told you how authors will sometimes sprinkle in clues to let you know what's going to happen next in the story? The story is called The Big One. And my schema, my background knowledge, is telling me that fishermen always tell stories of the one that got away or the big one that got away, right? So I'm predicting that the main character is probably going to have an encounter with the big one. And here we go. This is a story about the day I caught the big one. It's not like I come from a fishing family or anything. But one day last year, my dad's friend Steve took us fishing on his boat. After 10 minutes, I caught a huge bluefish. Beginner's luck, grumbled my brother Jack. Okay, seeing another character introduction. We have this main character, right? And we don't really know their name yet. Main character. And a character trait that I'm going to write down for them is that they love to fish. Then we also have some other characters, right? Jack, right? His brother. We don't really know too much about him yet, so I'll have to keep reading. Okay. Beginner's luck, grumbled my brother Jack. He was right, but I didn't care. From that moment on, I loved fishing. Nobody else caught anything the whole day. This is so boring, said Jack. I want to like fishing, but I just can't pull it off, my dad said. It's getting late, said my mom. Okay, pausing again. Now, I'm noticing a similar trait along with the introduction of the other characters, Mom and Dad. And so far, they do not like fishing. So I'm seeing the start of a conflict here, how one character is different from the others. Let's read on. It's getting late, said my mom. It was official. Nobody in the family liked fishing except for me. So here's how the two sets of characters are different. These are our minor characters. Jack, the brother, Mom and Dad, who don't really care for fishing. And then we have this main character who loves to fish. After that trip with Steve, I begged my dad to take me fishing, but he kept making excuses. Sorry, I have to do my taxes, he said. I have to fix my car, he said another day. I have to take a nap, he said another day, even though it was 10 in the morning. Then my mom told me about a fishing club at the YMCA. You'll get to be with other people who love fishing as much as you do, she said. It sounds awesome, I said, and it was awesome. We went to oceans, lakes, rivers, brooks, streams, you name it, we fished it. After each trip, my parents would ask me all about it and try to be interested. Billy's line got tangled, I would exclaim, and Nicole's bait box spilled, and there were worms all over the place. Wow, said my mom. Gee, said my dad. They just didn't get it. No one really gets it, except for other fishermen and fisherwomen. Okay, I'm going back to this previous page, and I'm going to bracket off this part here, because this is where Dad is doing whatever he can to not go fishing, right? Dad making excuses to not fish. And this main character keeps trying to get him to go with him. I'm sensing that this is that main conflict that's going to build throughout the story. Then, during the midwinter meeting of our group, I got the best news of my entire fishing life. We're going ice fishing, Mr. Pinkton announced. Mr. Pinkton was the leader of our fishing club. We're going to be waking up at 5 a.m., driving 2 hours upstate, and fishing on a frozen lake for 7 hours in 15-degree weather. We all broke out in cheers. Whew, I don't think that I would. That sounds really cold and really early. Ice fishing on a frozen lake? I had no idea what that meant, but it sounded fantastic. For this trip, each child must be accompanied by a parent or guardian, Mr. Pinkton added. Uh-oh. I mean, you and I already know what this uh-oh means, right? Think back to this. When we have a plot map, the problem is introduced and we go, uh-oh, too, right? That's this rising action and this conflict. Think about it. He is the only one that likes to fish, but everyone else in his family really doesn't like it. And his dad, who's probably going to have to go with him, is thinking of excuses all the time not to go. It wasn't until the next night at dinner that I got the nerve to bring it up. Dad, what are you doing on Saturday? Why, what's up? He asked. Well, I have this ice fishing trip and a parent has to come. My parents looked at each other. Well, let me think about this, my dad said. I could either go freeze on a lake for hours or sit in our nice warm house reading a good book. I slumped in my chair. Ooh, that's just such good visual language. I can just imagine him just like, at the dinner table just shrinking in. Ice fishing it is, he said. My heart soared. Really? Yup, on one condition. What's that? He smiled. That I never have to do it again. Okay, I'm going to underline this because yes, we know that he hates to fish, but I'm noticing another character trait is that he loves his child more than hating to fish. So I'm going to write that down. He loves his family. At exactly 5:13 Saturday morning, I felt a tug on my arm. I said, Jojo, wake up, Dad said. There's our character's name. I'm going to write that over here. Jojo. My dad turned on the light, which was brighter than the sun, and I got up. Whew, that is just some amazing visualization. You can imagine what that character feels. A light brighter than the sun. We packed the car full of coats, boots, snow pants, sweaters, and gloves, hats, and of course, cookies. When I got out of the car 2 hours later, I got smacked in the face with the coldest wind I'd ever felt in my life. The lake was down a long hill surrounded by pine trees that stretched all the way up to the sky. It was a pretty amazing place, but I was too busy trying to feel my toes to really notice. Mr. Pinkton was already out on the lake with all the other kids and their parents, carving holes in the ice to drop our fishing lines through. Hi guys, he calls, down here. My best friend in the fishing group, Charlie Lopez, was already sitting in a chair over an ice hole. Catch anything? I called. Just about to, he said. All fishermen are hopeful people. So that kind of gives me that character trait, right? If all fishermen are hopeful, then I can probably infer that Jojo is also hopeful. Dad made his way straight to the little tent that Mr. Pinkton had set up for people who wanted to get warm in and have hot chocolate. I'll be in here, my dad said. I looked at him. Just for a second, he added. Your hole is ready, Mr. Pinkton called to me. I checked it out. It was a beauty, perfectly round. The water rippled below 6 inches of solid ice. I tried to put a worm on my hook, but my hands were frozen stiff. Mr. Pinkton ended up doing it for me. Where's your dad? He asked. Drinking hot chocolate. Mr. Pinkton laughed. Smart man, he said, but I was embarrassed. Why wasn't my dad out here with all the other parents? Couldn't he like fishing just this once? Ooh, to me, that feels like conflict building. But then I heard a familiar voice say, "Let's get this party started." I turned around and there was my dad, slipping all over the ice, his hat falling off his head, trying to hold 2 cups of cocoa with his huge mittens. He looked down into the deep hole. "Somewhere in that dark, mysterious lake, there's a frozen fish stick with my name on it," he said. For hours we fished, which really means we waited. But that's what's awesome about fishing. You're not really waiting. You're doing other stuff, like talking. And my dad and I had tons to talk about. We talked about baseball, movies, music, food, school, girls, animals, and a bunch of other stuff. We told jokes. We got more hot chocolate. But we didn't catch anything. When the sun started to go down, we ran out of things to talk about. "I think my nose just fell off," my dad said. And even though he was trying to be funny, I knew that he was miserable. Suddenly, I was mad at myself. I decided that this fishing trip had been a lousy idea. I felt bad that I dragged my dad all the way to this frozen lake just to sit here and not catch anything. I felt dumb for liking fishing. Oof. Then, about 10 minutes before we were supposed to pack up, there was a tug on our line. "Dad, I got a bite!" I exclaimed. My dad jumped to his feet, then immediately slipped on the ice and fell on his butt, spilling hot chocolate all over himself. I started pulling. Whatever was on my line pulled back hard. It felt strong and huge. "Reel it in gently," Dad advised, even though he had no idea what he was talking about. Mr. Pinkton came running over. "Joe's got something," he yelled to the rest of the group. "Go easy on that thing," he said to me. Finally, after one last tug, I was able to pull my line out of the hole. Everyone gathered to see what I had caught. I reeled it in, full of excitement. At first, it was hard to tell what kind of a fish it was. Then it became clearer. It wasn't a fish at all. It wasn't even a live animal of any kind. It was something large, fuzzy, and very waterlogged. That word means like it's so filled with water that it's heavy. "It's a stuffed elephant," Charlie yelled. "What's a stuffed elephant doing in the lake?" Eddie Chan wondered. "Let's cook it on the grill," screamed Danny Burke. "It'll be delicious." Everyone laughed as I untangled the big pink furry mess on my line and my rod. My ears were burning with embarrassment. "It's not funny," I said, fighting back tears. I was about to throw the elephant back in the hole, but my dad stopped me. He brushed all the dirt and grime and ice off the elephant. "We're taking him home," my dad said. In the car, we talked about the freezing cold and us finally getting a bite, and my dad falling on his butt and spilling hot chocolate, and me catching the stuffed elephant. We laughed the whole way. "That was a blast," my dad said as we pulled into the driveway. It was? Notice that character change. How did the father change from the beginning of the story to right here? What sparked that change? Think about it. "It was," he said. "Thanks for taking me." 2 months later, in the spring, it was time for my fishing club's regular trip of the season. I was packing my gear when my dad knocked on my door. Is it okay if I come fishing with you?" I looked at him. "Are you sure?" "Sure, I'm sure," he said. And he came fishing with me. He also came the time after that, and the time after that. Altogether, we caught 1 fish, a little striper that we threw back, but it didn't matter. We talked and laughed and ate and had a great time. And that's what fishing is. And it turned out that my dad loved it almost as much as I did. I guess you could say that he was hooked. And that's how I caught the big one. That's the end of the story. There's one thing I'm left wondering. Okay? So we already know the title of the book is The Big One, right? But here, listen to how this author used this language. I guess you could say that he was hooked, right? He hooked his dad into fishing. So I guess I'm wondering, what's the big one? Is it the stuffed elephant that they pulled up from the ice? Or is it that he hooked his dad into sharing the same hobby as him? Or is it both? I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you think. But I'm going to write that question down to ponder. Who was the big one? Interesting. Okay, so let's go back and think for just a little bit. Our learning target for this week, right, that power standard, is to be able to explain the relationship among major and minor characters. The minor characters in the story were Jack, Mom, and Dad. But I'm going to kind of fold back Jack and Mom here because the story really focused on Dad and the main character, who we later learned was Jojo, right? And their relationship throughout the story. So here's what I want you to think about. And here's what you're going to talk to me about in our flip grid. How did the relationship between Dad and Jojo change throughout the story? What events caused that change? Did either character have an aha moment? And then coming back here, how do these interactions contribute to the development of the plot? How did the relationship that these two characters had move this plot forward? That's what we're thinking about this week, and that's what we're going to be writing about on Wednesday. But that's what I want you to think about for now, and then tell me in our flip grid. Good job today, guys. Can't wait to see your thinking.